In 1997, a couple vanished without a trace from a beach rental on North Carolina's Outer Banks. Their suitcases were still in the bedroom, their rental car still in the driveway. But the shower was running and no one was inside. For 27 years, the case remained unsolved. Until 2024, when a new homeowner broke through a bathroom wall and found something that should never have been hidden. What investigators discovered inside that crawl space will change everything. Subscribe now for full cold case breakdowns, real survivor stories, and long-form investigative mysteries. July 21st, 1997. Location: Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. The last person to see the Langdons alive was the girl who cleaned their rental. She didn't remember much, just that it was hot. The kind of hot that made the air feel soupy and electric, like a storm was coming but never arrived. She was 17, working the summer circuit for the Cape Shore Property Company, cleaning beach houses between checkouts. House number 114-Driftwood Lane- was a last-minute rental. 2 guests, 1 couple, paid in cash. She knocked at 10:01 a.m. No answer. She waited the 5 minutes per protocol, then unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything was quiet, but not still. The air conditioning was running. The refrigerator hummed. A paperback sat open on the end table, dog-eared. The master bed had one side pulled back. The guest bedroom was untouched. There were 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom, a wine glass on the floor beside the couch, but no people. Just a house that felt interrupted, like something had opened its mouth to speak and been cut off mid-sentence. She finished the cleaning, left the key in the box, clocked out by noon, and didn't think about it again until the headlines. Couple vanishes from rental home. No signs of struggle, no signs of exit. Teresa and Daniel Langdon. Married 6 years, no children, no record of criminal activity, no major debts. On vacation from Richmond, gone. No neighbors had seen them leave, no luggage was taken. The beach towels were still damp on the back porch. The only thing missing? A mirror. The bathroom mirror, ripped clean from the wall, the screws still in place. Just gone. Sheriff's deputies chalked it up to break-in, maybe a robbery gone wrong. But nothing else was missing. Not the jewelry, not the cash, not the credit cards, not the house keys. That was 27 years ago. The house went back on the rental market the following year, after a new coat of paint, some wall repairs, and a discounted listing that promised ocean breezes and coastal charm. Most people who stayed there didn't complain, but some left early. A woman in 2003 said she heard whispers in the ductwork. A couple in 2011 filed a noise complaint, scraping sounds from beneath the tub. One boy, age 10, refused to sleep in the master suite. He told his parents a girl had been watching him from the bathroom mirror. In March of 2024, the house was sold to Julia Holt, a 34-year-old furniture restorer from Durham. She'd lost her mother the year before and used the inheritance to buy her first property. A beach home, a fresh start. No bad history, according to the agent. No ghosts, no blood. Just drywall and promise. But 2 weeks after she moved in, Julia removed the tile behind the shower wall and found the crawl space. Date: May 2nd, 2024. Location: Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. The first time Julia Carmichael noticed the tile shift under her fingers, she assumed it was the grout. She had been scrubbing mildew off the far wall of the master shower when the sponge dipped slightly, just enough to catch her attention. She ran her palm across the porcelain again. Smooth, cold, but wrong somehow. The faintest give. A vibration that didn't belong to solid wall. Hollow. Behind her, the ocean thundered against the sandbar beyond the dunes. This stretch of the Outer Banks was quiet in spring, too early for tourists, too warm for locals to pretend summer wasn't creeping in. The wind through the cracked bathroom window carried the sharp tang of salt and the faintest scent of decay from the nearby marsh. Julia stepped back, eyes narrowing at the section of tiled wall behind the built-in shelf. The tile was clean, white, cracked in places, like the rest of the 1990s-era rental she and Peter had bought 6 months ago at a bankruptcy auction. Kill Devil Hills, the listing said. Oceanfront, walkable dunes. Need some TLC. TLC, in this case, meant gutting everything down to the studs. She grabbed her phone off the sink counter and took a photo of the tile, just in case she needed to show the contractor later. But even as she did, something itched at her gut. She pressed her knuckles to the tile again. Same soft give. "You're not normal," she whispered to the wall. From the hall, the sound of footsteps approached. "Jules," Peter called. "Did the plumber ever show?" "Nope," she said, setting the sponge on the edge of the tub. "And also, I think we have a fake wall." Peter appeared in the doorway, hair dusty from pulling insulation in the attic. He was still wearing the green Clemson sweatshirt she'd threatened to burn more than once. "Fake wall!" Julia nodded toward the tile. "It flexes." Peter stepped into the shower, tapped the tile with his knuckles, and frowned. The sound it made was unmistakable. Hollow. "Well," he said, "either the house is trying to communicate, or we're looking at a half-assed patch job." She handed him the screwdriver from the sink. "Let's find out." It took 30 minutes to remove the tile, 2 layers of crumbling drywall, and the damp plywood panel behind it. The space revealed wasn't large, maybe 3 feet deep, 6 feet high, boxed in by joists and decades of dust. Julia aimed her phone flashlight inside. At first, she saw nothing but a mess of insulation and rusted nails, but then her light caught on something near the bottom corner. Fabric, pale, dirty, partially shredded. She reached in and tugged gently. It came loose with a quiet rip. It was a button-up shirt, faded to a dusty blue, stiff with age and dust. Something about the way it was bunched, the torn edge, the clawed threads, made her stomach turn. She aimed her light lower. Scratches, long curved gouges in the wood paneling. Deep ones, fingernail marks. Peter leaned over her shoulder. "Is that blood?" She didn't answer, just stared at the spot near the corner where something else, something metallic, caught the light. She reached in, slowly, fingers trembling. What came out was a charm bracelet, the kind a woman might have worn in the mid-90s. A delicate silver chain with a tiny starfish, a flip-flop, and a heart engraved with 3 letters. TL. Julia turned it over in her palm. It was warm now from her skin, unmistakably personal. She whispered, "Peter, this wasn't storage." He looked at the wall, then the tile on the floor, then at her. "Oh my God," he said quietly. "Someone was in there." 2 hours later, the house was surrounded by flashing blue lights. Detective Ruben Rivera stood in the master bathroom, hands on his hips, scanning the crawl space as 2 forensics officers in Tyvek suits finished photographing the interior. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with thick graying hair pulled back into a stubby ponytail. His eyes were heavy-lidded but alert, and when he spoke, it was with the quiet precision of a man who had no interest in wasting breath. "Langdon case," he said, almost to himself. Julia, still wearing paint-stained jeans and a hoodie, stood just outside the bathroom door, arms folded tightly. "What case?" Rivera turned to her. "Teresa and Daniel Langdon. Vanished from this house in 1997. Tourists. Richmond, Virginia. The rental owner reported them missing when they didn't check out. Car still in the driveway, clothes in the closet, shower was running." Julia swallowed. "What happened to them?" He shrugged. "That's the thing. No sign of struggle, no signs of forced entry. Just gone." She felt suddenly colder. "And you think this crawl space?" Rivera stepped back out into the hallway. pulling a small ziplock from his jacket. Inside it, the charm bracelet. Her initials were Teresa Langdon, he said. This bracelet was mentioned in the original report. She was wearing it the night they disappeared. Peter appeared behind Julia, face pale. So what now? Rivera's eyes flicked from the charm bracelet to Julia, to the open cavity in the wall behind them. Now, he said, we dig. If the rest of that space is untouched, and that blood belongs to one of them, this house just became a crime scene. He turned to one of the forensics officers. We'll need to scan the adjacent walls, pull thermal, look for irregular voids. If there's one crawl space, there could be others. By sunset, the house had been sealed. Julia and Peter stood on the edge of the dunes as the crime scene team packed up for the night. The breeze carried the smell of salt and something else, the faint, coppery tang of old blood. She stared at the house, her house, now lined in yellow tape. Peter put an arm around her. You okay? She nodded slowly, but her voice was flat. That tile was holding a secret for almost 30 years. He glanced back at the bathroom window. What kind of secret? She didn't answer right away. But in her mind, she saw the scratches on the wood, the torn shirt, the bracelet, and she knew what had happened here wasn't just an accident. It was deliberate, controlled. Someone had trapped them there, and maybe someone had watched. May 3rd, 2024 location, Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. The morning after the discovery, the house was no longer theirs. Julia stood behind the police barricade, coffee going cold in her hand, as a white van from the forensics unit backed into the driveway. A second one was already there, equipment cases stacked on the lawn, extension cords trailing through the sand, tripods and scanners carried in one by one. Her house, their house, looked less like a renovation project and more like a crime scene from a Netflix documentary. The words, Cold Case Unit, Currituck County, were stenciled across the side of the lead investigator's vehicle. Detective Rivera stepped out. He didn't wear a uniform, just jeans, a dark windbreaker, and the kind of expression that came from 30 years of seeing the worst humanity had to offer, and still showing up for work anyway. He gave her a nod as he approached. You sure you don't want to wait somewhere else? He asked. We'll be here all day. Julia shook her head. I want to know what you find. Rivera sipped from his thermos. You grew up around here? Number Chapel Hill, she said. My husband and I bought the house as a flip project. We were going to Airbnb it by summer. Thought it'd be a fun side thing. He nodded slowly, then turned toward the house. Hell of a welcome. The crawl space was larger than it looked at first glance. Once Rivera's team broke through the inner panel and cleared away the rotted insulation, it revealed a box-like cavity, about 4 feet deep and running the length of the master bathroom wall. Inside, the forensics team had found more than just the shirt and bracelet Julia uncovered. They'd pulled out 2 long brown hairs, trapped in a cobweb near the upper beam, a pink plastic comb, cracked down the middle, a single flip-flop, faded white with a seashell print, and worst of all, deep horizontal scratch marks in the wood, consistent with human fingernails. One officer measured the space and tapped the walls with a hollow plastic rod. Sound echoes behind the far end, he said. Could be a secondary void. Rivera nodded. Scan it. A portable ground-penetrating radar unit was wheeled into the bathroom, its dish-like scanner aimed at the remaining walls. The tech operated it in silence, watching lines flicker across a tablet screen. After 2 passes, she spoke. There's another cavity behind the far left wall, smaller, vertical shape, roughly 5 feet tall, maybe 18 inches wide. Rivera turned to her. You saying there's another chamber? Not exactly. Could be a structural defect, but there's a distinct density difference. She tapped the screen. And here? Metal objects, irregular size, could be wiring, could be nails, could be something else. Rivera crouched near the base of the wall and looked at the tile. This was meant to be hidden. He straightened and looked at his team. "Get me a drill and a microcam. We're going in." Julia watched from the living room as the wall camera snaked into the second void. The team had bored a hole just wide enough to slip the fiber optic lens through. The image on the tablet was grainy, greenish, lit only by the device's onboard LED. What it revealed made Rivera exhale sharply. A mirror. A full-length one, mounted behind the wall, facing into what looked like a narrow, soundproofed chamber. The image reflected the glow of pink wallpaper, peeling edges, a plastic vanity set, a small mattress on the floor, stuffed animals lined along the baseboard. It was a hidden room, a child's room, built inside the wall. Julia stepped forward. That wasn't on any blueprint. Rivera didn't respond at first. He just stared at the screen. Then he said, "We've got a reconstruction basement in Durham. I'm having this wall removed, section by section, carefully. Everything's evidence now." He turned to her, gently but firmly. "Ms. Carmichael, I'm going to have to ask you to vacate the house until this investigation is complete. We'll arrange a place for you and your husband. The state can reimburse for loss of use." Julia swallowed. "Is that a child's room?" Rivera gave a slow nod. "Yeah. And this is still the Langdon case? It was a couple that went missing in this house. But what we just found might not be just about them anymore." Back at the precinct, Rivera laid out the Langdon case file on the long metal table in the cold case room. The file was thinner than it should have been. 2 missing persons. No bodies, no blood, no physical evidence, nothing but photographs, a short witness list, and a few oddities in the original scene report. Oddity 1. The couple's luggage was found in the bedroom, unopened. Oddity 2. The shower had been running for at least 6 to 8 hours before discovery. Oddity 3. A smell of bleach lingered near the drain, but no chemical traces were preserved. He flipped to the witness interview with the housekeeper, Delilah Boone. She had found the scene. The report noted that she was visibly disturbed by the silence. Claimed she heard something that sounded like singing, though no music players were found. She told the responding officer it came from behind the wall, but no one took her seriously. It was marked as subjective auditory stress response. Rivera jotted a note. Interview Delilah Boone. Reassess witness credibility. He turned the page and stared at the final item in the original inventory. Item number 24. Guest Journal. Entry dated August 16, 1997. Content. Storms rolling in. Might stay a few more days. Danny said this place feels too quiet. He tapped his pen against the page. Too quiet. That evening, Julia and Peter sat in a rented motel room 3 blocks from the house. Neither spoke much. Julia had downloaded the 1997 Missing Persons Bulletin. She studied the photo of Daniel and Teresa Langdon on her phone. They looked happy. He had a crooked smile. She was holding an ice cream cone and laughing. The kind of couple who left behind boxes of postcards and souvenirs. Not unsolved cold cases. She zoomed in on Teresa's wrist. The bracelet was there. Same charms, same initials. Peter looked over her shoulder. "That's the one." She nodded. He hesitated, then asked the question neither had dared voice aloud yet. "Do you think she died in there? In the wall?" Julia didn't answer. Not directly, but after a moment, she whispered, "I don't think she was alone." That evening, Julia and Peter sat in a rented motel room 3 blocks from the house. Neither spoke much. Julia had downloaded the 1997 Missing Persons Bulletin. She studied the photo of Daniel and Teresa Langdon on her phone. They looked happy. He had a crooked smile. She was holding an ice cream cone and laughing, the kind of couple who left behind boxes of postcards and souvenirs. not unsolved cold cases. She zoomed in on Teresa's wrist. The bracelet was there. Same charms, same initials. Peter looked over her shoulder. "That's the one?" She nodded. He hesitated, then asked the question neither had dared voice aloud yet. "Do you think she died in there?" "In the wall?" Julia didn't answer. Not directly. But after a moment, she whispered, "I don't think she was alone." May 4th, 2024. Location, Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. Delilah Boone hadn't cleaned a house in over 15 years, but she remembered the Langdon rental like it was yesterday. Detective Rivera found her at the assisted living facility in Kitty Hawk. Apartment 2B, back corner, windows facing the marsh. A cane rested beside her floral recliner, and her coffee table was stacked with crossword puzzles and Reader's Digest back issues. She looked smaller than Rivera remembered, her body hollowed by age, but her eyes were still sharp. "You're here about the shower house," she said before he even sat down. Rivera blinked. "Excuse me?" "That's what we used to call it," Delilah said, smoothing her skirt, "because the damn shower wouldn't stop running. Day I found that couple's things, water still going, like it had been left for someone else." Rivera took out his notebook. "You were the one who discovered the scene, correct?" "August 18th, 1997, she said without hesitation. "It was a Monday. I always cleaned Mondays, after the weekend turnover." She leaned forward. "But when I walked in that day, something felt wrong." Delilah had been a housekeeper for the Kill Devil Hills property company for nearly 12 years by then. She prided herself on noticing the little things: sand in the entry rug, stale coffee in the filter, trash bags double knotted or not. The Langdons were supposed to check out on Sunday morning. When the key hadn't been returned, the rental office assumed they'd left it inside. "I parked out front and noticed the car was still there," Delilah said. "Ford Taurus, Virginia plates. I thought maybe they overslept or needed a late checkout." She used her master key to open the door. "And the second I stepped inside," she said softly, "I knew they weren't there." Rivera scribbled a note. "What made you so sure?" Delilah's eyes drifted toward the window. "It was too quiet." She said it like it explained everything. Rivera waited. The AC was off. The clock radio in the bedroom wasn't playing. But the shower— She paused, her voice thinning. "The shower was running. And not in a normal way. It had been running for hours. The whole bathroom smelled like steam and bleach, like someone tried to clean something." Rivera asked, "Did you see any blood?" "No." She shook her head. "No blood, no broken glass, no overturned furniture. But the shampoo bottles had been knocked over. One of the towels was twisted, like someone had wrung it out in a panic." She rubbed her hands together slowly, as if trying to get rid of something. "And the mirror. I cleaned that mirror 3 times, but there were still streaks, smudges, as if someone had been gripping the edge, pressing their forehead against it." Rivera jotted the details, pausing as she added, "I heard music." He looked up. "In the bathroom, faint, real faint, like it was playing behind the wall, a child's music box or something." At the time, Delilah had reported everything she saw, but the responding officer, Deputy Lane, now long retired, had dismissed most of her observations. No signs of foul play, no evidence of a struggle. "Young couple probably ran off," he told her. "Happens more than you think." "I knew that wasn't right," Delilah said. "You don't leave your car, your wallet, your luggage. You don't leave a house like that unless something's very wrong." Rivera nodded slowly. "Do you remember anything else? Anything unusual about the layout of the house?" Delilah hesitated. "Yeah," she said. "The bathroom wall felt strange. When I leaned to scrub the tile, my hand knocked it. Sounded hollow." Rivera's pen stopped. "You told the officer that?" "I did." She gave a bitter smile. "And he told me it was probably poor insulation." That afternoon, Rivera stood in the gutted bathroom of the Langdon house, now a skeleton of pipes, studs, and exposed wiring. Forensics had cleared out the tile and wall panels. They were working on lifting tool marks from the wood beneath. The hidden chamber, the one with the mirror, the child's mattress, the soundproofing, had been cut open and fully documented. A separate team from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit was already on site, combing through the space for signs of ritualistic behavior, obsessive tendencies, or any signature left behind by the builder. This wasn't amateur work, the lead profiler said. Whoever made this room had time, money, and knowledge of structural engineering. Rivera knelt beside the crawlspace floor, running a gloved hand along the scratches. They were deep, more than desperation. There was a pattern, repetition. Some nails were broken off inside the wood. She was trying to get out, he murmured. He stood and studied the other walls. Any word on the DNA from the bracelet? The lab tech nodded. Positive match to Teresa Langdon. Mitochondrial DNA confirms maternal line. No secondary DNA recovered yet. What about Daniel? No trace so far. Julia returned to the property briefly that evening under police escort. She wanted to retrieve a few personal items, her laptop, her grandmother's ring, and a tote bag full of paperwork she'd left in the guest bedroom. Rivera walked beside her as she stepped into the house. It already felt different. Stripped of drywall and tile, the walls looked raw, skeletal, as if the house itself had been flayed open. "They ever find anything else in here?" Julia asked, pausing near the master bath. Rivera was quiet. 2 toothbrushes, 1 female, 1 male. Blood traces under the female handle. Could be from gum bleeding or something else. She nodded slowly. "You ever get the feeling," she said, "that a house is trying to tell you something?" Rivera's mouth twitched into the faintest of smiles. "I think this one's been screaming for decades." Later that night, in a dim-lit county archive room, Rivera found himself holding a piece of the past he never expected to surface again. It was the rental contract for the Langdons, retrieved from a scanned microfiche record. The original agreement was for 7 nights, August 10th to August 17th, 1997. But a note was scrawled in pencil at the bottom. Extended 3 days. Paid in cash. Confirmed by PM call, no signature, no initials. The number listed for the extension. A payphone outside the Blue Bucket Motel, 20 miles south, since demolished in 2004. Rivera leaned back. Someone extended the Langdons' stay after they were already gone. And someone wanted them in that house longer. May 5th, 2024. Location, Currituck County Sheriff's Office, North Carolina. Detective Rivera didn't sleep much the night the contract surfaced. He stared at the scanned copy again the next morning under the pale glare of the evidence room fluorescents. The handwriting in pencil on the bottom of the Langdon rental agreement still bothered him. Not just what it said, but what it implied. A stay extended after the couple had vanished. Paid in cash. By someone untraceable. But it wasn't the words that held his gaze. It was the faded circle around a scribbled phone number. A payphone, traced back to a long-gone roadside motel. The Blue Bucket, off Highway 158. Leveled in 2004. No security footage, no staff records, no camera logs. Still, there might be witnesses. He picked up the phone and called the archives again. "Do we have anyone who worked at the Blue Bucket in the 90s? The line crackled. "Hang on." A few minutes later, the voice returned. "1. Name's Beatrice Morton. Worked cleaning staff. Lives in Manteo now." Rivera scribbled the address. "Time to knock on more doors." Beatrice Morton remembered the man from the payphone. He was tall, kept his back to the lobby. Always wore the same windbreaker, she said, flipping through her scrapbook of old motel snapshots. Said his name was Mr. Candle Rivera, raised an eyebrow. "Candle." She nodded. "Weird, right? I don't think that was his real name." He came every couple months. Sometimes stayed in room 9, sometimes just used the phone and left. Did he ever come with anyone? Beatrice squinted. Once. He had a little girl with him. Real quiet. Maybe 6 or 7. She had a doll with no face. I remember that. Rivera's pen paused. Did he check in under any real name? She flipped to an old guest log, yellowed and taped together in places. With her finger, she traced faded blue ink. Here, she said, tapping the entry. August 17th, 1997, room 9, paid cash. Name listed as Gerald Stone. But I remember his voice. Same guy, same jacket, same weird, polite smile. Rivera leaned closer. That's the day the Langdons were supposed to check out. Beatrice looked up at him. So you think that man did something to them? Rivera didn't answer directly. He stood slowly and stared out the window. I think someone knew they'd be there a little longer. Back at the precinct, Julia sat across from Rivera in the small interview room. She'd returned voluntarily to answer follow-up questions. Rivera slid a folder across the table. Inside were the photos of the crawl space contents. The bracelet, the hair, the scratches, the broken comb. Julia stared at them, then spoke quietly. There's something I didn't mention. Rivera raised an eyebrow. Go on. When we were ripping out the cabinets the week before all this, I found a stack of brochures. Old ones, like late 90s, early 2000s, tucked way in the back behind a panel. Most were moldy, but one was folded weird, like someone had scribbled in it. You kept it? She nodded, pulling a manila envelope from her bag. Inside was a glossy trifold with a dolphin watching tour advertisement, dated 1997. On the inside flap, in looping handwriting, he says I can't leave yet. He's watching me from behind the mirror. Rivera's pulse quickened. You found this where? In the kitchen, behind the pantry shelves. We thought it was just junk. He scanned the handwriting, then turned to the next page. Another note, this time shakier. I heard someone breathing inside the wall last night. Rivera looked up. This is Teresa. It has to be. The crime lab confirmed it. The handwriting matched Teresa Langdon's signature on her driver's license, retrieved from DMV microfilm. Julia sat in stunned silence as Rivera laid it out. She wrote this during the final days of her stay, which means she may have still been alive, after the official disappearance window. Julia swallowed. Then why didn't she escape? Rivera didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into a second folder and pulled out a new photo. Because someone made sure she couldn't. He slid the image toward her. It was a door frame, barely visible behind insulation, discovered during the second wall cavity excavation. And just beneath it, set into the foundation, was a series of iron bolts drilled into the floor. Shackles. Whoever built this chamber, Rivera said quietly, never planned for her to come out. The discovery triggered a full-scale investigation into the original property management company that had operated the house in the 90s. Most employees were retired or scattered, but one name stood out, Gregory Kell, property manager from 1996 to 1998. He handled the Langdons' booking, filed the final missing persons paperwork, and then disappeared. No forwarding address. No tax records after 2001. Rivera pulled an old scanned personnel photo from the archives and compared it to the motel guest log's Gerald Stone signature. It was a match. Gregory Kell was Mr. Candle. On the 5th day, forensics broke through a third sealed chamber. Behind the guest bathroom, wedged into the wall beside the water heater, was another narrow cavity, no larger than a phone booth. It contained a rusted camcorder, a collapsible stool, a cardboard box filled with unlabeled VHS tapes, and a photo, black and white. Curled at the edges, Rivera held the photo up to the light. It showed Teresa Langdon sitting on a mattress in the hidden room, her wrists bound, eyes wide. Behind her, visible in the mirror, was a man in a dark windbreaker holding a camera. The edges of the photo were sticky, faded fingerprints, but the face in the reflection was clear. Same angular jaw, same receding hairline, same eyes Rivera had seen in the personnel file. It was Gregory Kell. That night, Julia stood alone on the back deck, watching the waves crash against the shoreline. The house, her house, glowed behind her, stripped of its walls, gutted like a body laid open for autopsy. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine Teresa and Daniel, two people who came here for peace, for quiet, and instead found something watching them from inside the walls. May 6th, 2024. Location, Currituck County Crime Lab, North Carolina. The journal was damp, curled at the corners, swollen from years of moisture, but it had survived. Technicians found it tucked inside a Ziploc bag, hidden beneath a section of attic insulation during the third full sweep of the house. The plastic was coated in dust, but sealed tight. Inside, a small floral-patterned notebook, warped but intact. It was labeled on the first page in careful cursive, Teresa Lynn Langdon, August 1997, Kill Devil Hills Rental. Our honeymoon, kind of. Detective Rivera read it 3 times. The first read-through was clinical. The second, horrified. The third made him close the folder and walk outside. August 11th, 1997. Daniel made me coffee this morning before the sun came up. We walked the beach barefoot and laughed at the ghost crabs. I think we both needed this. The year's been hard, but this place is beautiful. Quiet, maybe too quiet. August 13th, 1997. Storm coming. I love it. Feels like we're the only 2 people on Earth. Danny says the AC hum keeps him up at night. He tried unplugging it, but it's hardwired. The bathroom light flickers sometimes. I keep thinking someone's moving behind the glass. Shadows. Nerves. August 14th, 1997. Something's wrong. Last night I woke up and heard music, like a lullaby, but Danny was asleep. I went into the bathroom and the mirror was fogged, except for one handprint. Too small to be his, smaller than mine. I asked him this morning. He said I was dreaming, but I'm not. I know I'm not. Rivera flipped to the later pages. The handwriting changed, more rushed. Words pressed harder into the page. August 15th, 1997. Danny's acting different. Distant. I caught him standing in front of the bathroom mirror, whispering to himself. When I asked what he was doing, he said, listening. He hasn't touched his food, doesn't sleep. I tried to leave the house for a walk this morning, but the deadbolt was relocked. From the outside, he swears he didn't do it. But who else could? August 16th, 1997. He's gone. I woke up and the bed was empty. His things are here, his shoes, his wallet, but no Danny. I've searched the whole house. I thought I heard him in the shower, but the water was cold. There was no one there, only the mirror. I think something's inside it. Rivera pushed the journal across the table toward Julia, now seated beside the lab's evidence coordinator. She hesitated before picking it up. This was hers? She asked softly. Rivera nodded. Confirmed by handwriting analysis and residual skin oil matches, the bag preserved more than we expected. It's authentic. Julia began reading. With every page, her expression darkened. These aren't just paranoid notes, she whispered. She was being watched. Rivera pulled a second photo from the file, the hidden crawlspace mirror, recently removed from the cavity for testing. Glass was two-way, he said. Standard observation mirror, the kind used in old interrogation rooms, installed from inside the wall. Whoever built it could see her. Julia's stomach turned. She thought Danny was watching her? We don't think it was Danny. Not then. Maybe not ever. In a separate envelope found beneath the same attic panel, Forensics had recovered 3 Polaroid photographs, all taken in the hidden room. One showed the mattress. One showed a tray of food, peanut butter and jelly, apple slices, a bottle of water, and one showed Teresa, asleep under a thin pink blanket, her head turned away from the lens. On the edge of the final photo, someone had written in black marker, "Still beautiful, still mine." Rivera met with FBI profiler Dr. Lorna Hecht at the edge of the sealed scene later that day. "This is organized behavior," she said, flipping through the materials. "Meticulous, control-oriented. Probably someone with a carpentry or facilities background. No forced entry, no weapon, just psychological domination and environment control." "You think Teresa was kept alive?" Hecht nodded. "For a time. The notes suggest extended captivity. And the tone, she's not just scared. She's confused. That confusion? That's a tool." "What about Danny?" Rivera asked. "She never described seeing him again." "Possibilities. He left. He was killed. Or he was transformed, coerced, like she feared." Rivera folded his arms. "So she might have been trapped alone, feet away from help?" Dr. Hecht looked up at the gutted wall, its beams exposed, wires hanging like veins. "She might have been inches from rescue, and no one knew." That night, Julia couldn't sleep. She sat in the motel bed, laptop open, combing news archives for any mention of the Langdons. There were old headlines. "Couple vanishes from beach rental. No trace in Killed Devil Hill's disappearance." A few grainy photos. A candlelight vigil. But nothing beyond that. Then, buried in a 1999 editorial, she found something chilling. Local contractor Gregory Kell, who worked briefly for the now-defunct Cape Shore Property Company, declined to comment on the disappearance but said, "People come here to disappear. Some just do it better than others." She stared at the quote. Kell wasn't just hiding the truth. He was proud of it. May 7th, 2024. Location, Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. The sound came at 2:11 a.m. Julia sat upright in the motel bed, heart racing, unsure at first whether she dreamed it until it came again. A metallic click, followed by a faint wheeze, like air pushing through a narrow passage. She turned toward the bathroom. The vent cover above the sink was rattling. Peter stirred beside her. "What is it?" She didn't answer, just stared at the slotted metal vent, waiting for it to move again. But it didn't. Still, she got out of bed, crossed the carpet in bare feet, and stood on the edge of the tub to reach it. It wasn't loose. It wasn't even properly attached. She unscrewed it with the heel of a butter knife from the kitchenette drawer. And inside, tucked just past the lip of the ductwork, was a micro-cassette recorder, covered in dust, but intact. The next morning, she brought it to Rivera. He examined the device under gloves, noting the corrosion and brittle tape spool. But when he popped in new AA batteries and pressed play, the reel turned. A hiss, then the quiet thump of footsteps, and then a child's voice. "I'm still in here." Julia's skin went cold. Rivera turned up the volume. The tape crackled again. A man's voice came next, low, strained, but familiar. "Teresa, please stop screaming. They'll hear us," she gasped. "Was that—" Rivera nodded. "Daniel Langdon." The voice continued. "I told you not to fight. You'll make it worse. Just stay in the princess room. Do what he says." Julia's hands trembled. "The princess room. She mentioned that in the journal." Rivera leaned back. "We have something else." He pulled a manila envelope from the folder and slid it toward her. Inside was a printed transcription of the microcassette. 35 minutes of stuttering fear. Muted sobs. Daniel's voice breaking under pressure. By minute 19, the tape turned darker. "He comes at night now. I hear the screws turning. He watches us through the vent. Teresa won't eat. She won't speak. I think she's gone in her mind. He told me we'd be special, that we were the first, but not the last. Rivera later examined the original air duct where the device had likely been hidden. The crawl space behind the master bathroom connected to an elaborate series of air returns. Some capped off, others misaligned, just enough to hide things inside. They found 2 more cassettes. One was blank. The other contained a single, looped message. "You belong to the house now. The outside isn't real." The voice was slow, gentle, almost hypnotic. Julia covered her mouth as the tape played. It was a voice designed to soothe, a captor pretending to be a caregiver. Down in the forensics lab, a breakthrough emerged from the oldest and most analog of sources. A 1997 Kill Devil Hills building permit application, filed under the Cape Shore Property Company. Signed, G. Kell Project. Title, Bathroom Ventilation Expansion, Unit 7. The notes were handwritten. Rivera read them twice. Install vent observation grid with dual-purpose airflow plus viewing access. Mirror placement optional. Soundproofing foam along joists. Install playback shelf behind return grate. Julia leaned in. "It wasn't just a trap," she whispered. "It was a stage." Later that day, Julia asked to go back inside the house. She had no real reason, only an ache she couldn't ignore, a need to stand in the rooms again, to see with her own eyes what had been pulled from the walls. Rivera allowed it, under supervision. The floorboards had been removed, beams exposed, drywall stripped to the studs, but the structure of the house still held a strange intimacy, like walking inside a memory that didn't belong to you. She entered the master bathroom slowly, her footsteps echoing now in the hollowed frame. Then she looked up. The vent grate above the sink had been removed. A mirror once installed above it now sat on the floor nearby, cracked down the middle, and in the corner of the frame, scratched into the glass with something sharp. "Still here." Julia turned away, her breath catching, because just then, from somewhere inside the vent shaft, she heard breathing. May 8th, 2024. Location, Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. They found the passage behind the pantry wall. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, at least not right away. The outline had been disguised beneath layers of drywall, painted over in a floral coastal pattern that matched the rest of the 1990s-era kitchen. But a trained forensic team knew what to look for. Inconsistencies in the stud spacing, a tiny difference in sound when tapping, air pressure fluctuations. And then they found the seam. When the wall was removed plank by plank, a narrow corridor revealed itself, just wide enough for a man to walk sideways, shoulders scraping against the drywall. At the end of the passage, a false wall with a sliding panel, expertly fitted. It opened into the master bathroom crawl space. Rivera stared at it. "Whoever built this didn't just want to hide," he said. "He wanted access." Inside the hidden corridor, technicians discovered a folding tray, 2 large thermoses, several paper meal trays with traces of food residue, peanut butter, crackers, applesauce pouches. Everything was decades old, desiccated by time. But one thing still held its shape, a handwritten inventory taped to the wall. Each entry dated, labeled Meal 1, Meal 2, all the way to Meal 62. Each line followed by a single checkbox marked either checked, eaten, unchecked, refused. Rivera read it in silence. Some days, Teresa ate. Some days, she didn't. Most chilling, a final note at the bottom in red marker. She's beginning to listen. Still won't call me Daddy, but she will. Julia turned away. An analysis of the hidden passage revealed fingerprints. Daniel Langdon's near the crawl space, but on the sliding panel and meal tray, a third set, unidentified. but consistent with another set recovered earlier, the 2 sets of prints behind the mirror. The same hands had moved through both areas. Someone with intimate knowledge of the house's structure. Someone who entered and exited unseen, and someone who treated the secret rooms like a routine. Like room service, Rivera muttered. He was beginning to see the whole house differently, not as a crime scene, but as a machine. Every vent, every wall cavity, every soundproofed panel, deliberately constructed for control, not concealment. Everything inside this place was built for the performance, he said. Back at the sheriff's office, Rivera pulled the original case file from the Langdon disappearance and laid it beside the new evidence reports. There was one small note in the 1997 interview transcript that had never made sense until now. Housekeeper Delilah Boone had said, "The fridge was empty, except for one thing. A paper tray, wrapped in plastic, sitting dead center like someone had placed it there on purpose." At the time, it was assumed to be room service from a takeout order. But now, Rivera suspected otherwise. He ordered the tray reanalyzed. Within the old plastic wrap, preserved in the folds of a napkin, the lab found a fiber trace that hadn't been present elsewhere in the kitchen. Bright pink. Synthetic. Identical to the fibers found on the mattress in the princess room. It had been moved, from inside the crawl space to outside the fridge. A message, or a mistake. Later that day, Rivera interviewed the original property manager's assistant, a woman named Melanie Sykes, who had worked for Cape Shore Property Company from 1995 to 1998. She looked nervous when he showed her the old company staff photo. "That's Greg," she said, pointing. "Greg Kell. He hired me. Gave me my first office job." "Did you know him well?" "Not really," she said. "He kept to himself, had a lot of personal projects. One time he had me deliver a box of tiles to the rental house, the one on Driftwood Lane." "That's this house," Rivera said. "What kind of tiles?" "Pink ceramic." He said he was remodeling the bathroom for a theme renovation, said the guests liked whimsy. Rivera stared at her. "Did you ever go inside?" She hesitated. "Numbry always met me outside, told me to leave the supplies by the front step." That evening, a cadaver dog team was brought in for a full sweep of the property, particularly the foundation and crawl space beneath the house. Near the northwest support beam, one of the dogs signaled hard. Soil samples were taken. Ground-penetrating radar revealed something small, 6 feet long, 2 feet wide, irregular density. Excavation began at first light. By 8:40 a.m., they had uncovered a child-sized cot, wrapped in plastic, buried beneath 2 feet of compacted sand and plywood scrap. Inside the cot, bones. Small, disarticulated, likely female. The forensic anthropologist spoke quietly. "These aren't Teresa. Too small. These are from a child, maybe 5 or 6. Could be older depending on malnutrition." Rivera stood in silence. "Then we have another victim." Back in the motel, Julia lay awake. She couldn't stop thinking about the meal tray, the notes, the check boxes. Eaten, refused. Eaten, refused. It wasn't just tracking her behavior. It was a record of compliance. Someone had been testing Teresa's will, measuring her submission, grooming her through hunger, deprivation, psychological isolation, and now, maybe, doing the same to a second victim. She sat up and looked out the motel window at the house. From here, it was just a shadow on the edge of the dunes. But she swore she saw movement in the upper vent. May 9th, 2024. Location, Currituck County, Grandy, North Carolina. The Blue Bucket Motel was long gone. In its place stood a Dollar General and a vape shop, the sign still tilted from a recent storm. The motel had been demolished in 2004 after repeated safety code violations and rumors no one ever put on paper. Runaways, break-ins, a missing girl from room 9. But the land still remembered. Rivera stood in the parking lot beside a county historian, holding a scanned blueprint from 1996. Unit 9 had faced east. It had 2 vents, 1 window, and a mirror closet retrofitted in 1997. That same year, Gregory Kells stayed there under the alias Gerald Stone. 3 times, twice alone, once with an unknown child. The motel logs listed the child as Kay Lane, age 6. No last name found in the records. No guardian ever confirmed. Rivera turned to the historian. "You have photos of the room?" She nodded and pulled out a laminated page. The image showed a plain, sun-bleached room with cracked wallpaper and an analog TV bolted to the dresser. But there, tucked into the corner above the vent, was something small and black. A hidden lens. Rivera leaned in. "Is that what I think it is?" The woman nodded. "Cheap spy cam. Used to sell 'em at Radio Shack. Most motels installed real ones for security. This one? It wasn't in the official plan, not even wired to the front desk." The implication was clear. Room 9 wasn't a motel room. It was an audition room, a controlled space where Kell could test behavior, monitor reactions, measure fear, practice. And the house Julia bought? That was the final performance. Later that afternoon, Rivera tracked down a surviving piece of the original motel. A former maintenance worker, now 71, named Hank Dillard. Hank met him at a diner off the highway, sipping black coffee and avoiding eye contact. "You worked room 9? Rivera asked. "Sometimes." "You remember Kell?" Hank's jaw tightened. "Yeah, thought he was a little too polite. Always said thank you, always tipped in exact change." Rivera slid a photo across the table. One of the Polaroids from the crawl space, showing Teresa bound and half asleep, with the mirror behind her. "You recognize this room?" Hank studied it, then nodded once. "That ain't the beach house. That's the motel. Look at the baseboard. And that mirror? I put it in." Rivera felt his pulse quicken. "You installed that mirror?" "Yup. Kell had it delivered special. Told me to mount it tight, no light gaps. Said it was for his guest project." Rivera leaned forward. "Do you know who the girl was?" Hank's face fell. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a stained, folded envelope. "I ain't proud of this," he said. "But I took something before the place was torn down, found it under the sink." He handed it over. Inside the envelope was a photo, black and white. It showed a young girl, maybe 6 or 7, sitting cross-legged on the motel bed. Her face was turned, blurred in motion. She held a doll, faceless, cloth, and stared toward the mirror. Scrawled on the back, "K. Learns quickly. We'll try again if this one fails." Rivera stared at it. The first victim wasn't Teresa. She was a replacement. Back at the crime lab, the forensic team was analyzing Kell's cache of VHS tapes, recovered from behind the guest bathroom wall. There were over 60, most unlabeled, some water-damaged, others preserved like trophies, meticulously stored, tagged with dates and cryptic symbols. Rivera joined the lead technician in the secure viewing room. The first tape opened on static. Then, a handheld camera shot of a woman in her early 30s, chained to a metal cot in the princess room. Hair damp, face dazed. Beside her, a man's voice whispered instructions. "Now smile. Say hello to the camera. Say you're happy. Say this is your new home." The woman didn't respond. The voice didn't change tone. "You can make this harder than it has to be." Rivera stopped the tape. "What date was this?" he asked. The tech checked the timestamp. August 19th, 1997. 2 days after Teresa was reported missing. Later, Julia stood with Rivera in the shell of her bathroom. No walls, no mirror, just beams and the jagged wound where the crawl space had once been. "This was never a house," she said. "It was a studio." Rivera nodded. "Built for performance. Engineered for silence, every vent was an eye, every mirror a one-way window. Julia's voice dropped, and no one knew. No one looked, he corrected. They assumed the Langdons left. They assumed Teresa ran, but she didn't. He looked around the room, then back at her. She was right here, waiting. May 10th, 2024. Location: Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. They found the blueprint sealed inside a wall cavity, wrapped in a waterproof sleeve behind the utility closet. It wasn't just a building schematic, it was a map of control. Detective Rivera spread it out across the evidence table, weighed down by gloved hands. The paper crackled with age, its corners curled, but the ink was crisp. Black lines outlining the original layout of the house, overlaid by thick red notations drawn in marker. Each annotation told a story. PR marked a rectangle in the northeast corner, Princess Room, hidden between structural beams. MV pointed toward a false return vent, Mirror View. FE circled a crawl tunnel with one line written beneath, Feeding Entry, Crawl Only. Julia stood beside him, staring in disbelief. This wasn't renovated, she said. It was designed. Rivera nodded. Everything, from the inside out. In one corner, someone had sketched a crude diagram of a human figure lying down, surrounded by walls. Beneath it, a single word: acceptance. A structural engineer was brought in to examine the hidden passageways. He confirmed what Rivera already suspected. The modifications were intentional, not retrofits. Hidden entrances were reinforced. Air ducts widened. A second layer of insulation had been added to muffle movement. I've never seen anything like this outside of military containment, the engineer said. It's not just concealed, it's engineered for silence. A fortress of soundproofed horror. The next discovery came buried beneath the floorboards of the guest bedroom. While removing a section of warped wood, the forensic team uncovered a metal lockbox, rusted shut. Inside were 3 unlabeled cassette tapes, a faded children's book, Goodnight Princess, a drawing in crayon, a stick figure girl inside a box labeled Me, and a hair ribbon, pink, still knotted, with blood on one end. The tapes were prioritized for digital restoration. The first tape showed footage of the house under construction. Gregory Kell walking through with a clipboard, pointing at beams, giving orders to off-screen workers. The second tape was different. It showed a child, maybe 5 or 6, sitting on a mattress inside the hidden room. Same mattress later used for Teresa. Same pink walls, same mirror. The voice behind the camera whispered, "Say your name." The child shook her head. "Say it. Say you belong here." The girl looked at the mirror and whispered, "I'm Katie." Rivera froze. Katie. The same name scrawled on the back of the motel photo. Kay learns quickly. DNA pulled from the ribbon matched a 1996 missing child case from Chesapeake, Virginia. Caitlin Lane. Age 6. Reported missing after being abducted from a grocery store parking lot. Her case had gone cold in under 2 weeks. No leads, no suspects. Rivera stared at the VHS tape image, frozen on her face. Katie had been the first. Teresa was the second. The house had 2 graves, and maybe more. Julia returned to the house with Rivera later that day under controlled access. She walked slowly through the exposed bones of the house, arms folded against her ribs. Every creak of the floorboard felt like a breath. Every exposed beam a fingerprint. In the guest bathroom, they discovered something else. A hidden chute behind the medicine cabinet, connecting to a box-shaped void below. It was where used items had been dropped. Worn clothing, food wrappers, broken utensils. But one thing hadn't degraded. A Polaroid photograph wrapped in tissue paper. It showed Teresa, eyes open, hand on the mirror. On the back, written in red ink, "She still resists." might need replacement. At headquarters, Rivera reviewed the timeline. Katie Lane, taken 1996, last seen in Norfolk, Virginia. Gregory Kell, moved to Kill Devil Hills that same year. Teresa Langdon, disappeared 1997, house sold 1999 after Kell vanished. Property left dormant until 2023. But the gap that haunted Rivera came after. No bodies had been recovered, only bones. He stared at the cot unearthed from the crawlspace, the one with child-sized bones. "We never found Teresa," he said aloud. "Only Katie." Julia looked up from the blueprint, voice quiet. "Then where is she?" They searched the walls again, infrared and thermal imaging. And finally, behind a sealed drain pipe under the floor joist in the master bath, they found a sealed PVC tube buried horizontally in the slab. Inside, another VHS cassette. Its label read, TL Final, May 11th, 2024. Location, Currituck County Crime Lab. North Carolina. Rivera watched the screen in silence. So did Julia. So did the rest of the forensic team, crowded behind one-way glass as the VHS tape labeled TL Final spooled into motion. The image flickered, then focused. A mirror, cracked at the edges. Foggy, and behind it, a man, his face half obscured by shadow. But the voice was unmistakable. "You wanted answers." He leaned closer to the glass. "So here they are." Gregory Kell, age 47 at the time of the recording. Shirtless, hair matted, he looked thin, unwell, as though the house had started to consume him too. People think you can just walk through life without being seen. Not true. People see everything. They just don't know what they're looking at. He tilted the camera. The angle changed. Now it showed Teresa Langdon, curled up on the mattress in the princess room, barely conscious. She stopped fighting 2 days ago, stopped asking for Daniel, stopped asking about the beach. Now she listens, but I don't think she's ready. The camera turned again, back to Kell. "I built this house for them, but people don't appreciate what you give them, not until it's too late." He walked toward the camera and adjusted the focus. "This will be my last entry." The tape cut to static for 6 full seconds. Then, black and white night vision. Kell standing in the crawl space, speaking into the lens. "I sealed her in, fed her, taught her. She still won't call me father, but she stopped screaming. That's enough." Another cut. Now Kell is sitting in front of the princess room mirror. The glass is fogged with condensation. He drags a knife across his palm, letting blood pool in his hand. "If no one sees you, maybe you're already gone." The final segment is the longest. It shows Teresa sitting against the back wall, dazed, barely breathing. Kell's voice, off camera, asks, "What are you now?" A long pause, then Teresa whispers, "Not me." He asks again, "What do you want?" Her voice shakes. "Out." The tape ends with the camera placed on the floor, facing the mattress. No movement, only breathing. Then darkness. Julia turned away from the screen. Her eyes were wet, jaw clenched. "She survived longer than anyone thought," she whispered. Rivera nodded. "Weeks, maybe months, until he either killed her, or she escaped. Or someone helped her," Julia said. "Daniel." Rivera shook his head. "No trace, no second body, and we still haven't found Kell." But they found something else. In the back of the princess room, tucked into the far left corner of the wall, beneath insulation, sealed behind painted drywall, was a glass jar. Inside, a folded note, written in rushed, fading ink. Rivera read it aloud. "If anyone finds this, my name is Teresa Langdon. I'm 33 years old. I came here with my husband, Daniel. He is gone. I don't know if I'm alive. I don't know if this is real, but I am still in here. Please don't leave me behind," Julia whispered. She wrote that after they declared her missing. Rivera nodded. And then he said the part that chilled them both. There's no date. She could have written it a week after, or a year. DNA tests on the VHS tape in the jar confirmed female skin cells consistent with Teresa's maternal line. The paper note also had Kel's fingerprints on one edge. It meant two things. Teresa was alive long enough to write it. Kel read it and sealed it away. He never wanted her to be found. The investigation expanded. Interpol was notified. A BOLO was issued in 6 states. Rivera stood before the press that evening, delivering what they could confirm. The house was designed to detain and psychologically condition. Multiple victims were involved, including one child positively identified. Gregory Kell was alive in 1997, possibly longer. Teresa Langdon's fate remains unconfirmed. No body, no remains. The case is no longer cold. That night, Julia drove to the edge of the dunes and parked in silence. She stared at the house, now cordoned off, the entry boarded, the windows taped with evidence tags. Somewhere inside, Teresa had spent her final days, or escaped, or disappeared into a system that would never recognize her again. Julia closed her eyes and whispered into the dark. Where did you go? And from behind her, in the wind, the sea, the sand, it almost felt like something answered. May 13th, 2024. Location, Chesapeake, Virginia. Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. It wasn't Teresa. The girl on the tape, small, dark-haired, maybe 7, wasn't Teresa Langdon. Julia knew that the second she saw the grainy footage recovered from the motel dumpster behind the demolished Blue Bucket Motel. Her frame was smaller, her posture too rigid, like she'd been coached or punished into silence. The FBI analysis confirmed it. The girl on tape 34 was Katie Lane, the first known victim, possibly not the last. But that's not what chilled Julia. It was the voice behind the camera. Not Kel's. It was Daniel Langdon. Say the rhyme again, Katie. Silence. Katie, say it. The girl's voice, barely audible. If I'm good, I'll see the light. If I'm bad, it's endless night. The tape ended in static. Julia stared at the screen. That's not just Daniel watching. He's participating. Rivera leaned against the table, arms crossed. If that's true, then Teresa didn't just disappear. She was betrayed. They returned to the evidence board. Everything connected to the crawlspace, the blueprints, the motel, and now Daniel's voice in multiple recordings. One conclusion was becoming harder to deny. Kel wasn't working alone. In several videos, footsteps could be heard overlapping Kel's voice. In one, Kel speaks, while another man feeds the girl through the wall vent. DNA swabs from the vent revealed 2 male contributors, Kel and an unknown male, partial match to Daniel Langdon's father. Julia stared at the screen. He helped him. Rivera didn't respond, because that meant every headline, every tearful family statement, every false trail for 27 years was a cover. They exhumed Daniel's parents' backyard in Williamsburg. Under the garden shed, buried beneath poured cement, cadaver dogs alerted twice. In the dry dirt, investigators found a rusted toolbox wrapped in tarp. Inside, a VHS labeled Training DL, a woman's earring, and a handwritten confession, half-burned, water-stained, but readable. I told him no, at first, but she wouldn't listen, and he said we could help her, that it was better than the world. He said we were making a home. I didn't think she'd stop talking. And then she did. Signed, Daniel Langdon. Julia didn't cry. She just stared at the page, then at the house. It looked smaller now, less like a monster and more like a mausoleum. One built by 2 men, not one. Kel built the rooms. Langdon built the story. Together, they built the lie. Rivera sat beside her. We'll find him, he said. She didn't look at him. Which one? At 4:11 p.m., a tip came in from a retirement home in Virginia Beach. An elderly man had died the week prior. No ID, no relatives, no medical records. But in his belongings, a set of drawings, all of the same room. Pink walls, one vent, no windows. At the bottom of every page, TL still waiting. Rivera and Julia arrived by nightfall. The man's fingerprints were burned off. Facial recognition inconclusive. But in his closet was a single tattered object, a stuffed cloth doll. No face, one button eye, the same doll seen in the old motel photos, Katie's. In the chest pocket of the man's jacket was a note. I watched her sleep, for years, but I never stopped hearing her scream. They buried the remains of Katie Lane beside her old elementary school. Dozens of people came. Julia read the eulogy. Rivera stood at the edge of the crowd. Still no sign of Teresa. No body, no sightings, no trace. But Julia believed something now. She hadn't died. She'd escaped, because someone had helped her. Someone not on the tapes, not Kel, not Daniel. Someone else who knew the layout. Someone who sealed off the vent and left one last note in the wall, scratched behind a mirror panel recently discovered during remodeling. She's not gone. She got out, and she's not coming back. May 14th, 2024. Location, Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. Unknown. The door was never supposed to be found. Not the front door, the one tourists used. The one captured in every rental photo for years. The other door. The one behind the water heater, past the sealed crawl space, behind the studs. It had no knob, no frame, just a hollow that led into pure dark. Rivera and Julia stood together, breathing shallowly as the last piece of the drywall came loose. A breeze hit them. Cold, faint, air from somewhere deeper. "Jesus," Rivera whispered. "This wasn't a crawl space, it's a tunnel." They sent in a remote camera first. It traveled 26 feet. At the end of the tunnel, a trap door, nailed shut from the inside, and next to it, a pair of shoes. Small, pink, covered in dust. Rivera dropped to one knee, shining his flashlight inside. "The treads worn smooth," he muttered. "Someone was walking in them for a long time." Julia didn't speak. She was staring at the wall near the door. Dozens of scratch marks, all at child height. Vertical, countless. Some shallow, others desperate. Beneath them, one word etched in shaky cursive. Out. The trapdoor opened into a buried room, no more than 5 feet wide. It contained a mattress, a broken lamp, a plastic mirror, a rope tether still nailed to the corner post, and a set of pages, diary entries torn from a spiral notebook. Most unreadable. Smudged, wet, ink blurred. But one stood out. Rivera held it under the light. "He thinks I don't remember my name. He calls me something else now, but I write it here so I don't forget. Teresa, I count the days. I think I've been here 200, maybe more, but I know he's getting tired. He coughs at night. He doesn't sleep much. He forgets to lock the door sometimes. One day I'll go through it, and I won't come back." Julia looked up. She got out. Rivera nodded slowly, and never looked back. The public wanted resolution. A headline, a name. But there was no Teresa Langdon in any modern database. No fingerprints, no driver's license, no tax return, no death certificate. Rivera started to believe the girl who escaped that house didn't just run. She erased herself. 2 days later, a nurse at a women's shelter in rural West Virginia submitted a report. It was unusual. Just a routine intake that never got processed. From 2003. A woman, mid-30s, no ID, gave her name as Tess Rainier, refused to answer any personal questions, stayed 3 nights, never returned. But in the margins of the intake sheet, the nurse had scribbled a note. Patient repeats rhyme under breath. "If I'm good, I'll see the light." Julia sat on the motel bed with that note in her lap. She whispered, She lived. She lived for years. Rivera stood in the doorway. If she's out there, she doesn't want to be found. Maybe not, Julia said. But maybe someone will hear her. Maybe someone else still stuck will hear her story. She looked up at him and realized they can leave too. The case of Gregory Kell was officially marked as a posthumous open file. Daniel Langdon's remains were cremated under federal order with no family to claim them. But the house? The house was burned. Deliberately, publicly. An act of cleansing, of defiance. Julia stood at the edge of the crowd as the flames rose, her face lit orange in the smoke. The princess room, the mirrored vents, the open door. Gone. Later, she returned to the shore, not to forget, but to remember. She brought with her a ribbon, pink, faded, blood-stained. She let it go into the surf. The waves took it, slow and silent. She whispered only 2 words before she turned and walked away. "You're free." June 4th, 2024. Location unknown. The woman behind the counter asks for a name. She hesitates just for a second, then says, "Tess. Tess Rainier." The clerk doesn't look up, just taps the keys. "Room's ready," she says. "Checkout's at 10. Tess nods. Takes the key. Room 6. It's small, clean, too quiet, but it doesn't smell like bleach or rot. No hidden vents, no mirrors on the ceiling, just a plain lamp, a soft bed, a window with a working lock. She sets down her backpack, pulls out a notebook, a pencil, and begins to write. They think I'm dead. They burned the house. They named me on the news. They called it horror. They called it evil. But they didn't call it what it really was. Home. Not because I wanted it, but because it's where I learned what I had to become. She hasn't used her real name in years. She buried it somewhere in the dark. Just like she buried him. Gregory Kell. Not in a grave, but in silence, in refusal, in memory. She sees his face sometimes, in windows, in shadows, in people who walk too slow or say father too softly. But she knows now, that voice was never hers. She took it back, and she doesn't speak it aloud anymore. She travels from town to town, doesn't stay long. Leaves things behind, though, notes in church basements, phone numbers in motel Bibles, drawings in shelter lobbies. Always the same, a girl with long hair sitting in a pink room staring at a mirror. Sometimes she writes out beneath it. Sometimes just, "You are not alone." In a library 2 counties away, a girl finds one of Tess's drawings taped to the back of a bathroom stall. She recognizes the room. It's the one she still dreams about. She takes the drawing, hides it in her backpack, doesn't speak about it for weeks. Then she does, and everything begins again. Tess sits on the bed in room 6 and finishes her journal entry. Then she tears the page out, folds it into thirds, and slides it under the mattress. Someday, someone will find it. Or maybe not, but it doesn't matter. Because Tess Rainier has one rule now. She always leaves the door open.